They were even calling names of neighborhood kids who hadn't even been caught in the arrest. Those kids were brought in for questioning over the next several days, all black and Hispanic.
There's an epidemic in America's criminal justice system. The prosecution and conviction of innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Welcome to the American Justice Podcast. Your hosts, Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller, come together to bring you the inside scoop on all of the wrongful conviction stories, both new and old. It's not only about the innocent who have been in prison, but also the victims of crimes as well. No one deserves justice more than them. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the American Justice Podcast,
where we talk shit
and we talk crime,
but we never talk shitty crime.
All right. Hey, C. Derick, how's everything going this week?
Man, oh, what a week. You know, it was a very beautiful week here in North Texas. Got out, got some sun, got some exercise, and then this morning, karma decided to crap on all of us, and it's freezing precipitation once again.
I feel like in this for some reason, this winter has been like all over the place. It's been warm and then cold and then warm and then cold, and then, you know, it's like, come on, Texas.
I mean, without getting too political and talking about climate change and everything, we're in for a roller coaster ride from here on out. So it's going to be like a box of chocolates. We never know what we're going to get. It's going to be pretty crazy from here on out, I believe.
Well, I guess we'll adapt as we need to, or have to.
We always have. I think that's what society forgets, is that weather has been steadily changing over the years. If you look at old farmers' almanacs, they talk about it then. Everything seems to go in like a 30, 35-year cycle.
Yeah.
So we're experiencing the same kind of weather patterns that they were 35 years ago.
Right.
So, you know.
I remember back in like the 90s or something, they were talking about like the El Nino and you know, all that stuff. And then you don't hear about that anymore.
You don't.
Although we had Katrina, and then we had.
Just, you know, it is what it is. We'll adapt like we always have as a society. We'll all be living in domes, but that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay. It'll look like Logan's Run.
All right. Well, that'll be, you know, I always wondered about that, like what it would look like, you know, 100. I'm sure the people like 100 years ago were like, oh man, in 100 years they're going to be doing, you know, flying around on spaceships and, you know.
Yeah, I want to say everything from my childhood that we were supposed to have in the future, we have it pretty much, except for flying cars.
Right.
And hoverboards.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
I'm really pissed off at the Jetsons. Hanna-Barbera lulled me into like a false sense of security as a child, thinking that we would have these things, and we do not. But I mean, good God, especially around Dallas, you see these people driving and how they drive. Can you imagine what it would be like if you put them behind the stick of a flying car?
I cannot.
I think we're doing just fine the way we're good. We're good.
Although I think I said 100 years ago. I can't. They don't even think they had planes 100 years ago, did they?
I don't remember.
When was the Wright brothers? Like I would say it was like 1910s, like right around.
Like early 1900s, right around the same time that the car was invented too. It's like both of those.
People just got tired of being in their own little village and they wanted to get out.
You know, we really haven't invented a whole lot of anything except for like computers, computer technology, smartphone technology, everything that we've invented since the Roswell incident has all been like communication type technology.
It's all been one big cover up.
Because that's what the aliens wanted us to do. That's what they're telling. That's what they're telling us to do.
We should do an episode one day on just like like crime in the paranormal, like alien realm.
Oh, totally, man. Totally. Look, I lived in the desert for quite a while, and I used to just climb up on my roof and lay back, chill out, and watch things in the sky. I mean, there's a lot of unexplained stuff out there.
Yeah.
Of course, the drugs didn't help much. But
that only explained 50% of it, right?
50%.
Nice. All right. Well, you know, today we're going to be talking about the Central Park 5. Have you ever heard of this case before we?
I'd never heard of the Central Park Five before this case, and the more I researched it as we're getting ready to do this episode, it's crazy. It actually involves one of my favorite people in the entire world, but we'll get to him in just a little bit.
All right. Well, the Central Park 5 case was about an aggravated assault and a rape of a woman in Central Park on 4/19/89.
April 19th.
April 19th.
Wow.
Yeah, 1989. Before that, like I was only a mere teenager, I guess.
Yeah, I was 16. I'd just gotten my driver's license and lost my virginity, and 16 was a very eventful year for me.
A good year. Nice.
Yeah, it was a good year.
Well, there's a lot of similar attacks in the park and on the same night. In fact, I remember seeing a news story that was talking about like the 70s and 80s in New York was just like, anything goes and huge crime and
it
all
was
that
trash.
stuff. And,
Central Park. I mean, not Central Park, but like Times Square. I've been lucky enough in the last, in the last decade to go to New York City like over 50 times. I've explored the entire city. I've been there a lot. I was doing research for a book that I released a few years ago called Far From Home, and it took place in New York. And there's only so much that you can gather from television and the internet, and I needed to know exactly how it felt, what it sounded like, what it smelled like, everything. I needed to actually touch it to be able to describe it successfully in this novel. And I've been in New York City 50 times since then, and I absolutely love the place. But Times Square now is a tourist trap.
Yeah,
compared to in the 70s and 80s. It was stacked a mile high with garbage, and there was porn theaters and everything else. So it's changed a lot.
Yeah, I've seen it the way it is now a couple times, and it's hard for me to imagine what it was even like back then.
Yeah.
But all right, well, 5 Black and Latino kids were convicted and served anywhere between 6 and 12 years. In the end, someone confessed while they were incarcerated, and the charges against the 5 were vacated. I don't know if anyone listening has ever been to Central Park, but I want you to get this in your head. It's huge.
Incredibly huge.
I haven't officially done the math, but I believe you could fit most, if not all, of downtown Dallas into Central Park. And it goes on forever. Now imagine being in Central Park after dark. I understand you've done it.
I have done it. I remember it well. It was the only time that I stayed in New York City where I was going to be there after dark. And since a big chunk of my novel takes place in Central Park at nighttime, I really needed to know what Central Park was like after the sun went down. And I'd heard horror stories my entire life about, muggings and rapes and just crime going crazy in Central Park after dark. Even New Yorkers are like, you don't go in Central Park after dark. It was close to Thanksgiving because they were getting ready for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. I do remember that. It was also the night where the grand jury announced that they weren't going to indict the police officer in the Ferguson shooting.
Ferguson, Missouri.
Ferguson, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in Times Square watching live the grand jury decision with tons of other people. Like the streets were packed in Times Square. And when they announced that they weren't going to indict that police officer, you could feel the mood in the crowd change. So I'm like, well, time to get back to Brooklyn, baby. So I hopped a subway and just got out of there as soon as I could because things were starting to get a little crazy. Not as crazy in New York as they were in Ferguson, Missouri, but in New York. And I remember when I got back to my hotel in Brooklyn, I remember turning on the television and there were just news reports from all over the country of different like riots and demonstrations breaking out all over the place. So
kind of like from our teenage years, the Rodney King case.
Right.
There was riots everywhere.
I remember that as well too. I remember going to the mall with a notepad and a pencil and me and my best friend at the time. And I remember store clerks going, "What are you doing?" And we're like, well, when the rioting breaks out, we just want to be organized. So we're taking notes. We want to be able to look at our shopping list, grab exactly what we want to grab, and get the hell out of here. We don't want to be unorganized about it.
We're pre-shopping.
Yes. God, my high school days.
That's funny.
Brought to you by marijuana.
Right. It was a nationally followed case and fueled public opinions about how New York City is perceived as lawless and overrun with crazy kids. After the exonerations, it led the way to become a prominent example of racial profiling, discrimination, and inequality in both the legal system and the media. The defendants went on to sue New York City, and they made a lot of money, $41 million total.
Did you ever see the film Kids?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
in the theater.
Yeah, it came out in the 90s, and that is such a great film, man. It just I saw it when it came out. I believe I was in my early 20s. And I remember watching it, and that just blew my mind. It was the first thing we ever saw Rosario Dawson in.
Yep.
She's like one of the only people from that film that actually, God, now she's in Star Wars. I mean, she's Ahsoka Tano, and she has her own series coming out. But there's a film that was just released recently called The Streets Are All Silent. And it's about the infusion of skating and hip hop music in the late 80s, early 90s New York. And a lot of those kids that are in the movie Kids are in this documentary because that's how they got discovered, was the skating. So that's how they got discovered for the film Kids. It's really worth a watch, and it's got a great soundtrack too. I'm not really big into like modern hip hop, but that late 80s, early 90s hip hop is just amazing, man. It's so good. Plus the skating and just all the views of the city from back then. It's good. I believe it's called The Streets Are All Silent. You guys should check that out. Scott, you should check that out as well.
I should check it out. You know, it's funny you talk about hip hop because I have a friend that likes hip hop. And, you know, he always plays music for me from today and, you know, like a few years ago, whatever, like the recent stuff.
Right.
Can't understand a damn word they're saying.
No, they're all mumbling.
But I always bring up, why can't we go back to the days of like Run DMC and like Beastie Boys and stuff like that?
It's like somewhere there's a record producer that doesn't even bother to get the guy up out of bed. He just takes the microphone over to him. He's like, "All right, sir, feel free to start rapping." And now then you have modern music.
Your Stories on Video is the perfect service to preserve all of your memories for generations to come. If you've ever thought to yourself that it's time to get all of those precious memories down on video, now is the time. Here's a quick sample of one of our videos.
My name is Daryl Kaiser, and I was born in 1925 in Canby, Minnesota. The happiest day of my life. It has to be when I got married. Yeah, that would have to be my happiest day. I sat down in a chair that was several chairs, and there was women on the opposite side, and I ordered me a drink, and I looked down that way, and Betty was looking at me. So I winked at her. And the next thing I know, then I went and asked her for a dance, and we danced and several times, and then I asked to take her home. I can't say that I ever gets out of my mind at all.
Daryl hired Your Stories on Video because he wants his grandkids and their grandkids to hear from his own mouth and his own likeness what his life was like. He also shared the family ancestry as only he could. Going back and researching archives are one thing, but watching the person that lived it is so much better. The process to get a video is very simple. Just go to www.yourstoriesonvideo.com and request a consultation. Then one of our experienced story consultants will work with you from the beginning to the end to make sure your video is exactly what you want it to be. Many kinds of individuals and families utilize our service. From the older generation wanting to pass down their wisdom to those that have an unfortunate medical diagnosis. Contact Your Stories on Video today at yourstoriesonvideo.com. Mention the American Justice Podcast and receive a 25% discount.
All right, well, now let's get on to the whole story. On the night of the attacks, 32 teenagers who lived in East Harlem committed assaults and robberies against a lot of people in the park, and the cops were called. This all happened in one of the less desirable sections of the park in the North Woods area. There were reports of cyclists being attacked, cabs being smashed with rocks, etc. They even robbed and beat a guy, took his food and beer, and left him unconscious.
There are sections of Central Park that are the less than desirable places. You have, I guess it's Central Park West, where you have the apartment building where they filmed part of Ghostbusters. It was Dana Barrett's apartment. Also, that's I believe it's the same building where John Lennon and Yoko Ono lived during the time of his murder and died right there across the street where Strawberry Fields is right. Where it's got. I know a lot of people have seen photographs on the internet of the big stone circle that says "Imagine." I actually have like 4 different photographs of me kneeling and giving up peace signs with that, and you can watch my hair grow through the progression of those photographs.
Oh wow!
It's a beautiful place. But then you have like the other like really really rich part of Central Park. And then you have the undesirable sections of it because it's impossible to explain how large Central Park is.
Yeah.
You just have to. It would take you more than a day. It's like Disneyland. It would take you more than a day to see it all, to see everything there is to see in Central Park. Yeah. And you can get lost. There are woods in Central Park. You can get lost.
Yeah. I've never actually been there. I've been to New York twice, but I've never been to Central Park. I want to do that.
Man, if you can get there on a Saturday in the springtime, just when the weather's still a little cool, but just everything's starting to bloom, and man, and some of the best food too.
Really?
the street carts along the edge of Central Park. Some of the best. Probably the best gyro I've ever eaten in my life came from a street cart near Central Park. Man, just
nice.
Such a good time.
Well, on the same night, the female victim was dragged into the woods from the pathways, brutally beaten, and raped. After the cops found her, they upped their game and started arresting teenagers left and right. Her name was Trisha Meili. This was referred to at the time as one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s.
Which is why I've never heard of it until now.
Right. And, you're not from New York, so.
That's true.
Trisha was going for a regular run in the Central Park shortly before 9 p.m. Now, let's put this in perspective. It's April 1989. New York City was a crazy place, as we've discussed. The sun goes down much quicker in the city because it's full of buildings. She was doing this alone. She was tackled, dragged 300 feet into the woods, that's a football field, ladies and gentlemen, and assaulted, raped and beaten near death. She was discovered 4 hours later, naked, gagged, tied up, and covered in blood. The police called it tortured.
No, that's absolutely true, what you're talking about with the way the sun sets in New York City. Especially now, this is April of 1989, so we're talking after daylight savings time.
Right.
So a little bit later, but still, when the sun begins to go down in New York City, especially in the winter time, man, it gets dark in the city at like 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's already dark because the buildings are so tall. You're down in Manhattan. It completely blocks out the sunlight.
Right.
And you're using your headlights at like 4:30 p.m., 5 o'clock.
Yeah, you're basically just in the shadows.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk some details. She was in a coma for 2 weeks, suffered hypothermia, brain damage, hemorrhagic shock, lost 80% of her blood. God. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Her skull was fractured so badly that her left eye was dislodged.
Whoa.
Dislodged. Like, that's got to be a lot of force. 21 skull fractures in all. Everyone expected her to die. They even gave her her last rites.
I don't know how she 21 skull fractures.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, because of this, the cops treated it like a homicide. But then she came out of the coma. She couldn't talk, read, or walk. She was later sent to a long-term care center in Connecticut and did 6 months worth of rehab. She mostly recovered, but still had some lingering side effects from the attack like amnesia, loss of vision, and loss of balance. She had no memory of the attack whatsoever, and she wasn't cross-examined during the trial. She did manage to release a book in 2003 called I Am the Central Park Jogger, a story of hope and possibility.
I love how she can't do all of these things, but she can release a book. It makes what I do sound very insignificant.
I mean, think about it. I was under the impression that she was had amnesia after the attack. This book had to be a lot of blank pages.
It was a pamphlet. That's what it was. How to join the Mormon religion.
Well, I think it's more of the story of her recovery and never say never. All that.
It would have to be about her recovery because she had amnesia. She can't remember anything from the attack.
Right. Well, the police were dispatched at 9:30 p.m. and responded with scooters and unmarked cars. Yes, there's nothing more intimidating than the New York City Police Department scooter.
Oh, they're everywhere. Since Segways have been invented.
Right.
Down in Times Square, like the
touristy
touristy part of New York. Yeah, they're everywhere on Segways.
Yeah.
Do they know the guy who invented Segways accidentally drove off a cliff in a Segway?
Did he
and
really?
died? Yes,
No.
that's how he died.
Oh my God.
He accidentally drove off a cliff.
It's like, stop, no! Well, they started snatching kids from Harlem in an arrest frenzy. This was even before Trisha was found. No, they didn't find her until about 1:30 in the morning. After that, they upped their game and began apprehending everybody. This was a large group of kids, and they were ratting on each other like it was going out of style. The ones later referred to as the Central Park Five were Anton McCrae, Kevin Richardson, Yusuf Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise.
Man, God, I don't know. My circle of friends was very small growing up. But when I got to the Army, especially the basic training, AIT tech school years, it's a lot like childhood. It's a lot like childhood. It's a lot like, I guess, school.
Right.
And you make a lot of friends and you travel in large circles. And up until that time in my life, I'd never really experienced that sort of thing. But you have a drill sergeant go in the room and like hold up something that got left in the bathroom. And he's like, who does this belong to? And everybody just starts pointing fingers at each other. Or whose cigarettes are these? Or I can imagine the chaos that the police were going through. But it sounds like they brought a lot of it on themselves. The police did.
Yeah,
so.
just arresting everybody.
Yeah.
Well, wait, Kevin Richardson, isn't that a Backstreet Boy?
I'm not sure. I don't remember what those guys' names were. I tried to force them out of my memory.
AJ McClain, Nick Carter.
My ex-wife listened to them, and I really tried hard to push both their names and their music out of my head.
Well, I think it was Kevin Richardson. I could be wrong, but I think there was. But anyway, obviously not this Kevin Richardson, even if
probably not. Although it wouldn't surprise me.
Right. All right. Well, videotape confessions started the next day after the detectives had finished a ton of unrecorded interrogations.
Sounds familiar?
Right. The 5 suspects had already been in custody for 7 hours. Santana, McCrae, and Richardson made statements in the presence of their parents. Wise made several on his own without parents, guardians, or a lawyer.
Not so wise.
Right. Lopez was questioned with the parents present at 3:30 a.m. They named other kids who were involved in the Central Park crime spree, but none of them knew anything about the attacked jogger. None of them had attorneys.
Dude, if I was a parent at 3:30 in the morning and I got called out of bed in New York City, 3:30 in the morning is the only time in Manhattan where there's not traffic.
Right.
Like, I remember driving like a madman through the streets of New York at 3:30 once, and it was so fun. It was like something out of a video game.
It's like you never see this.
Yeah, you never get to do that. Most people are in bed, but God, getting called to the police station at 3:30 in the morning as a parent.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it was probably a building full of parents since they had arrested so many kids.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, why the hell aren't you in bed?
Right. Well, I feel like, if you're the parent of a teenage boy, you have to kind of brace yourself for, I'm going to be called down to the police station, at some point. Because let's face it, teenage boys do stupid shit.
I never, raising my son, who is 21 now, in the Army and married and living in Hawaii, asshole. I never got a call from the police when it came to him. And and he was a little smart ass kid, really smart mouth. I don't know where he got that from. He had like a black Mustang with like a thumping stereo system, and he just terrorized the streets of our hometown.
Right.
And I never got a call from the police about him because I was the smart dad. I always caught him first, and I'm worse than the police.
Right. I was going to say, I guess he's good at whatever he was doing if he was never caught. So,
yeah.
You know what they say, the only bad criminal is the one that gets caught.
Right. If you can't be good at it.
That's right. All right. So Salam told police that he was 16, which meant that he could be questioned without a guardian present. Fortunately, his mother showed up and put a stop to that shit with a quickness. He didn't sign his written statement, but the court accepted it as such. The police said that he'd made verbal admission stating that he was present at the rape. This was after a detective lied to him and said his fingerprints had been found on the victim.
Just really, really quick. Like, they don't really often, or is it even possible to find someone's fingerprints on a victim? Like, I don't, is that even possible? Like,
well, not on the skin.
Yeah,
but they could have some, like they could be wearing something that has, would
but
accept
even like
fingerprints
clothing.
Well, like a medallion, or like
okay,
some people wear like little trinkets and stuff.
But,
so
God, these lying ass cops!
I know, right?
And these dumb kids,
right? Hey, when you're not experienced in law enforcement, you don't know what cops can do or what they can't do.
But CSI wasn't around, but was Law and Order around back then? I know these kids had to watch some of that stuff.
Right. Salam says to this day that he had heard them beating one of the kids in a room next door. They would enter his room and promise that he was next. A sixth defendant, who is not known as being part of this group, pleaded guilty to lesser charges in 1991 and received a reduced sentence. Prosecution of the 5 remaining defendants, Kevin Richardson, Anton McRae, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise, and Yusuf Salam, in the rape and assault case was based primarily on confessions which they had made after lengthy police interrogations. They eventually withdrew their coerced confessions, pled not guilty, and refused plea deals. None of their DNA matched anything collected at the rape site.
Yeah, I can imagine there was like just a pause, like all of them all at once going, wait a minute.
Wait.
I think we got duped here.
Yeah, you didn't say you did it. I didn't say, wait, did you say you did it?
Yeah.
All right, well, the names of these juveniles were released to the media before they'd even been arraigned or indicted. It was discovered that most of the kids came from stable, financially secure families. The New York Times published a cautionary editorial against the use of labels and questioning why such, quote, well-adjusted youngsters, unquote, could have committed such a savage crime. The media printed the suspects' names, photos, and addresses.
What?
And their families began receiving threats. Because of this, a couple of the African-American newspapers chose to use the victims' names. Reverend Calvin Butts was questioned as saying, quote, the first thing you do in the United States of America when a white woman is raped is round up a bunch of black youths. And I think that's exactly what we have here.
Even though the word reverend and butts should never be used in the same sentence, the guy is absolutely 100% correct. It was the 1980s. There was a woman who was like beaten within an inch of her life and raped in Central Park near Harlem. They weren't even going to look at white kids. There's no way.
Exactly.
Like even today, here it is. We're over 30 years later.
Right.
They still wouldn't do that. They still wouldn't look at white kids.
Not first.
No, not first.
Not,
and
maybe not ever.
I've met a lot of really nice New York City cops. They're very friendly and they're very helpful. That's a big damn city to walk.
Right.
Or drive.
Right.
And they're very, very helpful. And unlike the cops I met living in Los Angeles, who you didn't even make eye contact with them.
Right.
Like if you made eye contact with them at a stop sign,
you were doing something wrong.
Yes,
you were getting pulled over.
For general purpose, they would just like get out of their car and knock you upside the head. But New York City was not like that. And I never met detectives or anybody like that, so I can't really speak. But the cops on the beat there, man, were all just really friendly and just really, really helpful.
I wonder if Plano, Texas, is where all the LA cops go to retire.
Probably,
because that's pretty much the same thing in Plano.
So crazy there, man. And it's like the city where in Texas where everybody is moving. Yeah. So I guess it would make sense.
Well, the cops there are horrible, and if you live in Plano, I'm not sorry. All right, here we go. Real estate mogul Donald Trump.
Oh, my buddy.
Oh, your buddy.
My
Here
friend.
we go. All right. He called for the return of the death penalty for a murder in the full-page advertisement in all 4 of the New York City major newspapers. He said he wanted criminals of all ages to be afraid.
Including him.
And why? But why, you might ask? I know a certain old man right now who doesn't appear to be afraid of any crime he's committed.
Right?
Why these children in 1989?
Because he's the type of man, like most warmongering people, who like to pick on things they consider to be lesser than themselves, such as children, women, and animals.
Right, exactly. Well, that's calling the kettle white, if you ask me. He went on to say that he wanted them to suffer and that their civil liberties end when an attack on our safety begins.
Hypocrite.
Hypocrite, Mike. An attorney for one of the young defendants was quoted as saying, "Even a fool can become a multimillionaire."
True.
Well, let's forward to 2016, and they can become so much more.
Exactly.
Trump was accused of being the fire starter of a public outrage. It's good to know that some things never change.
I know. I love it. He's like, I want these boys to suffer. And then from 2016 until currently, if they watch the news, they totally are still suffering, as are all of us.
Yeah, don't look at anything I've done, but look at those guys. 4 of the 5 kids confessed to the New York Police Department about being involved in other crimes in the park on the night in question. Salam's unsigned statement was entered into evidence as well. They were accurate about the other crimes, but there were errors in their forced confessions. None of them confessed to raping the victim, but they did say that they were present. Their coerced confession stated that they'd either held her down or touched her.
But I mean, how many people does it take to hold down one person? I mean, like...
Well, I think it's the whole, mob mentality thing. Like, hey, I'm getting in on this or I'm getting in on that.
Well, one person was doing the raping while a dozen other either held her down or touched her. I mean... Right. Nobody's going to do that.
Wait, were they part of a union though?
Either that. I mean, I wouldn't have done that. I was afraid. There's a rape going on. I'm afraid I'm going to get something on me. I'm not going to go down there and hold anybody down.
Well, apparently these were young teenagers, so they probably weren't.
Even as a young teenager, I didn't want to get anything on me.
Well, also remember that this was. Let's remember also that this was way back before DNA was really the kind of technology that we have now. So people back then just weren't really thinking of. How many people or how many crimes have been exonerated because they found DNA now
right.
that didn't match, because back then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they weren't really worried about getting their saliva or their semen or whatever on
But
them.
Also, man, you're a group of kids living in like the greatest city in the world where you can never run out of stuff to do. Why in the hell are you out there doing this?
Right, exactly.
I guess because it's free. It doesn't cost anything to do this. It doesn't cost anything to just beat people over the head and rape them.
Right. It's totally free, except for 20 years of your life.
Yes, 20 plus years of your life.
All right. So they claim that they'd been intimidated and lied to by police into making false confessions. Judge Thomas B. Galligan, almost said Gilligan.
That would be great if it was Gilligan. Oh, little buddy, You got a verdict coming out today?
Then he turns around and hits him on the head with a hat.
We're showing our age, Scott.
I know,
We're
right?
showing our age.
Yeah, I have to insert Gilligan's Island clip here. All right, so Judge Thomas B. Galligan of the State Supreme Court of Manhattan was assigned to the case and conducted the pretrial hearings. Typically, judges were assigned by sort of a lottery, but the court administrator assigned him to this case specifically. He accepted the forced confessions and unsigned statements into evidence. Again, none of their DNA matched what the police had taken from the jogger's cervix or running sock, but they reported the results as inconclusive.
I remember when I first read about like them taking DNA out of her sock, I'm like, well, maybe there were more present, and that's what they were doing. Well,
they've been watching those movies. That's what you do in the movies. Anyway, so they were tried into two groups. The first trial, which began June 25th and ended on August 18th, 1990, defendants Antron McCrae, Yusuf Salam, and Raymond Santana were tried. Each of the teenagers had his own defense counsel. The jury consisted of 4 white people, 4 black people, 3 Hispanics, and 1 Asian American. Meili actually testified at the trial, but her identity was not given to the court. None of the 3 defense attorneys cross-examined her because of her injuries.
Well, she didn't want to spoil the book.
Right. You gotta keep the book right.
And first of all, let me give props to the city, county, and state of New York for mixing up the jury.
Right.
That's very, well, I say it's very unusual, but a lot of the cases we cover come from like Podunk, Texas, Podunk, Wisconsin, Podunk, anywhere where
all white people.
You just grab a random group of white people and sit them down. You give them $20 a day and a burger.
Right, exactly. I don't even think they get 20 in
They probably
Hunt
don't.
County. All right, so the jury deliberated for 10 days before rendering its verdict on August 18th. Each of the 3 youths were acquitted of attempted murder, but convicted of assault and rape of the female jogger, and convicted of assault and robbery on John Laughlin, a male jogger who was badly beaten that night in Central Park. Wait, they didn't rape him?
No, they didn't rape him.
Oh, okay. Salam and McCrae were 15 years old and Santana 14 years old at the time of the crime. As such, they were each sentenced by Judge Thomas B. Galligan.
Yes, not Gilligan.
Not Gilligan. To the maximum allowed for juveniles, 5 to 10 years each, in a youth correctional facility.
God bless, man. Just this whole case just blows my mind.
Right.
And the chaos surrounding it. And then you've got the blowhard just fueling the fire with the ads he's taking out in the newspapers.
Right. Oh my God.
Hey, man.
All right. Well, the second trial of Kevin Richardson and Corey Wise began October 22nd, 1990, and also lasted about 2 months, ending in December. Kevin Richardson, 14 years old at the time of the crime, had been free on $25,000 bail before the trial. Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Lederer had a lengthy opening statement, and Wise broke down at the defense table after it, weeping and shouting that she had lied. He was removed temporarily from the courtroom. Richardson's defense counsel made a motion for a mistrial, but because of the potential effect on the jury, but the judge rejected it. The trial proceeded.
Yeah, that is kind of a cheap move. They're like, hey, he's crying. He's crying. The jury might think he's innocent because he's crying. We got to have a mistrial.
Right. My defendant's crying. My guy that I'm supposed to be controlling is crying, so we got to have a mistrial.
God, the legal system in this country is such a joke.
Can you imagine, though? That would be like every defense, if that was every defense attorney ever would be like, okay, as soon as she finishes with her opening statement, just bust out crying.
Yeah. Did you go 75 miles per hour in that 55 mile an hour zone, Mr. Miller? Yes.
Your Honor, we need a mistrial. My defendant is not capable of continuing in this trial, obviously. Look at him. Look at him.
And he's very sorry. He's very sorry for speeding, Your Honor.
He's very, very sorry for the thing that we're saying he didn't do.
He had a turtle head poking out. He had to get home and get to the bathroom. He's one of those weird people that can't poop in a public place.
All right. Well, the defense attorneys noted that each youth had limited intellectual ability and said that neither was capable of preparing the written statements or videotaped confessions submitted by the prosecution as evidence. They contended that the confessions had been coerced from youths vulnerable to pressure because of their age and their intellectual capacity. Meili testified again at the trial. Again, her name was not given in court. This time, one of the defense counsel's, Wise's lawyer, cross-examined her. She later said in an interview on Oprah.
Oh, here we go.
You know it's good when you're getting on Oprah.
Uh-huh.
She said, I'll tell you what. I didn't, wait, no, she's from New York, so she probably didn't say, I'll tell you what.
No, she didn't say, I'll tell you what. She said, I tell you what.
I'll tell you what.
I didn't feel wonderful about them boys' defense attorneys.
Especially that one that could cross-examine me.
Yeah.
Now I made her Italian. I don't know if she's Italian or not, but I tell you, I'm going to get all of them. We're going to get all of them. Anyways. All right. So
look at you fucking freaking nature.
She's that's my cousin Vinny, right?
I think so.
I think that's where, yeah. Because it's what's her name that was in it? Was that Rosario Dawson?
No, it was Tomei, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god!
But I remember her having that New York accent. Like,
so hot in that movie. Hey, she's still hot as Aunt May in the new Spider-Man movies too.
Oh,
Aunt May is not supposed to be that hot. Like
right.
Stan Lee did not. I guess Stan Lee was the one who created Spider-Man. Not sure if he created Aunt May, but I'm sure she wasn't supposed to be that hot. She's supposed to be like the old lady on Courage the Cowardly Dog. You know, she's supposed to be like B. Arthur or something. She's not supposed to be.
She's not hot Aunt May.
No,
she's just Aunt May. She later said in an interview on Oprah, I'll tell you what, I don't feel wonderful about the boys' defense attorneys, especially the one who cross-examined me. He was right in front of my face and, in essence, calling me a slut by asking me questions like, when's the last time you had sex with your boyfriend? Wise's lawyer had also asked her whether she had ever been assaulted by men in her life, suggesting that a man she knew may have attacked her, and implied that her injuries were not as severe as they had been presented.
You know, that happens. I mean, that a defense attorney is not way off in doing that. I mean,
right.
There have been several cases throughout the years where, just out of angry recognition for men, I'm going to blame this person for something that happened to me earlier in life.
Right. And I think, a lot of people don't understand. It's the defense attorney's job to give their client a fervent defense. Like they have to do everything that they got to do to try to, of course, then you got to weigh that with possibly pissing the jury off. So,
True.
You got to walk a delicate line there. Well, Richardson was the only one of the 5 defendants to be convicted of attempted murder of Meili, in addition to sodomy and assault of her and robbery and riot in the attack on John Laughlin, another jogger in the park. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in a juvenile facility.
God, is that still a crime, I guess, that was on the books in 1989 in New York City? Sodomy?
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't until the Supreme Court just decided that sodomy was not a crime.
The government's been tagging us all in the butt for years. Now they just finally decided to make it legal. That's great.
Although I'm not sure that the Supreme Court decision had a differentiation between consensual sodomy and non-consensual. Okay. So,
the government never gets my permission before they do it. So
right. Yeah, they do it to us all the time. All right, Corey Wise, 16 years old at the time of the crime, was acquitted of rape and attempted murder. At trial, Melody Jackson, the sister of one of Wise's friends, testified that while incarcerated in the Rikers Island, he had told her that he had restrained and fondled the jogger. Wise was convicted of lesser charges of sexual abuse, assault, and riot in the attack of the female jogger and on Laughlin. Because of his age and the violent nature of the felony charge, he was tried and sentenced as an adult. receiving 5 to 15 years in an adult prison. After the verdict, Wise shouted to the prosecutor, "You're going to pay for this. Jesus is going to get you. You made this up."
And that prosecutor walked outside into the parking garage, got in their BMW, counted all the money in their wallet, and said, "I don't give a shit."
Right. Exactly. Well, jurors who agreed to the interviews after the trial said that they were not convinced by the youth's confession, but were impressed by the physical evidence introduced by the prosecutors. Semen, grass, dirt, and 2 hairs described as, quote, consistent with the victim's hair and that were recovered from Richardson's underpants.
Okay, I sense a little bit of racism going on right there. You know, since these were all like Black and Hispanic kids, you know, I'm sure they were just, oh yeah, it's consistent with.
Right. It is not a Black or Latino pubic hair.
Right. It wasn't blonde. Therefore.
All right. Well, according to an FBI expert who gave evidence at the trial, all 5 defendants could be excluded as being the man who had left the semen samples inside of Meili on a sock. In total, 14 men were tested, including the defendants and Meili's former boyfriend, and all were excluded. The semen belonged to another unidentified male. Years later, more advanced DNA testing also revealed that the hairs in Richardson's clothes did not match the victim.
Of course not.
So the question is, why is he carrying around someone else's hairs in his underpants?
Could have been from the person before.
Right, exactly. Maybe that was from John Laughlin.
Maybe you don't change your drawers.
All right. Well, let's get to the sentencing and appeals. The boys,
yes, by all means, let's do.
The boys were sentenced to the maximum for each of their age groups. 4 of the 5 appealed the rape conviction the following year. Santana was the only one who passed on the appeal. It didn't matter anyway, since all of their convictions were upheld. Many believe that Donald Trump's ad played a role in leading the jury to the conviction. Defense attorney William Warren said, quote, "He poisoned the minds of many people who lived in New York City and who, rightfully, had a natural affinity for the victim." Time magazine backed these words up in 2019 when looking back on the case.
Because by 2019, he had already poisoned the minds of the entire country.
The 4 youngest each served between 6 and 7 years in juvenile facilities. They earned GEDs and associate's degrees while incarcerated. Salam became a spiritual Muslim leader while in the facility and claimed that family was important to making it through the ordeal. He was locked up a few miles from the Canadian border in upstate New York, but his mother still came to visit him 3 times a week.
That's insane.
Wise, the one that sentenced to the adult facilities, was confined to solitary due to the personal violence he endured. Even at parole hearings, all 5 maintained their claim of innocence.
You know, I'm going to say something right now about that kid's mother. I mean, coming to see him 3 times a week, and he's incarcerated in upstate New York. Upstate New York is nowhere near New York City, right. And in order to get there, you have to drive down a lot of mountainous roads in all kinds of weather, snow and ice and everything, and just without fail came to see him like through. Oh, yeah. Man, that is so impressive.
Mom of the decade, yes. Right there. All right, so let's get to the convictions being vacated in 2002. 10 years after the Central Park 5 were incarcerated, convicted serial rapist and murderer Matias Reyes was serving a life sentence. He'd never been ID'd as a suspect in the rape of Meili, but was believed to have raped another woman in the park 2 days before. How much rape is going on in the Central Park?
It's crazy. It's like, you know,
it's like I didn't rape that one. It was 2 days before.
It's like they were going on like simultaneously, like side by side. Hey, scoot over! I'm raping over here.
Quit making so much noise.
I'm not laughing at rape. Just don't. We'll get comments. We'll get dirty. We'll get dirty remarks in the comments. C. Derick Miller laughs at rape. No, I'm just laughing at the concept of 2 different criminals side by side arguing over the lack of space.
Right.
It's a joke, America.
And
Laugh.
didn't in season 1? Didn't we get accused of like being racist and anti-Semitic?
I think we did. We also got accused of just hating everywhere.
Right.
This may be one of the only episodes we've ever done that takes place in a location that I love.
Right.
I love New York City. New York City is probably it's like my third favorite place in the country.
Right.
Beneath Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, of course.
Right. Well, the question remains, why would any woman choose to go to this park alone after dark, knowing that it was a rape fest in 1989?
Yeah.
Anyway, there was such a lack of comparison since the joggers case was originally classified as a homicide case. In 1989, Reyes raped a total of 5 women that we know of, killed one, and was interrupted after robbing another.
God, he's busy.
He's a busy guy.
Yeah, back in 1989, man. Ooh, I
couldn't get enough.
I had to buy a calendar. I had to like schedule that shit out.
I always wonder about those serial rapists or serial killers that like have like 100 victims. You know,
yeah.
Like, how do you did you literally make notes every time?
No, seriously, he has like a kitten calendar hanging in his kitchen with a dry erase marker, and he just writes what he's going to do from day to day. Let's see, kill Frank.
All right. Well, after meeting Wise while incarcerated, Reyes confessed to raping Meili. The DA's office was notified of the confession, and the evidence was reviewed again. The DNA was a match. The confession came after the statute of limitations had passed, and the Central Park Five had already served their sentences.
Luck.
Reyes claimed that it was the right thing to do.
Sure, but that's my kind of luck. They're like, hey, I just wanted to let you know you didn't do it after all. You didn't rape that person. Yeah, no shit. I know I didn't rape that person.
I know,
no,
right?
seriously, you didn't rape that person. Someone confessed. Yes, I know I didn't rape that person. I tried to tell you guys I didn't rape that person. Well, anyway, someone confessed and you're free.
And it turns out you didn't do it.
I've been free for 5 years already.
Right.
Oh, well, here's some money.
There's always, that it's always fun to confess to crimes after the statute of limitations. Yeah. In 2002, their convictions were withdrawn, and they sued the hell out of the New York City. Malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress.
I notice that you keep skipping over the F words in my script, Scott. Are we trying to be a family-friendly show now?
I've been given the criticism that we drop too many F-bombs.
Do we really?
Yeah.
First of all, what gives somebody the right? I mean, it's just a word. It's just 4 little letters. 4 little letters. People abuse the word love, another 4-letter word. People abuse the word love more than they do the other 4-letter word. All right, it's just a word.
Okay.
It's 2022 America.
Well,
it's
they
time
said
to get
that
over ourselves.
Ass and shit and all that is fine, but
poopy.
Just the F word. They just
you can talk about the doo-doo, but I don't want to hear the F-bombs.
Right, exactly. In 2002, DA Robert Morgenthau recommended vacating the convictions due to the confession and new DNA test results. He also questioned the veracity of the original confessions because of the inconsistencies. Also, a reconstruction of the original events bared significant conflict, but it was never brought up in the trial. There was no physical or forensic evidence that pointed to the defendants. The Central Park Five had all of their convictions overturned by the New York Supreme Court Justice Charles J. Tejada on December 19, 2002. The victim was quoted as not believing her attacker was just one person. If I remember correctly, wasn't she unconscious through most of it and stated she couldn't remember anything?
Yeah, they're like, oh, there's no way that happened. There was no way it was just one guy. Yeah, how do you know? I thought you said you couldn't remember anything.
Well, I wonder if she maybe remembered like when they started attacking her, but then as soon as they hit her head, she couldn't remember. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe some dude showed up later. I don't know.
All right, well, let's talk about the aftermath. The defendant's lawyers still blamed Donald Trump for the inflamed public opinion of the case and believed that Trump owed apologies to the defendants and their families. Even though there were protests outside of Trump Tower chanting, quote, Trump is a chump, he never apologized.
He knew he was a chump. Therefore, he never apologized.
If they only knew what was coming a decade or so down the line. A panel was commissioned to review the case and presented their findings in January of 2003. Known as the Armstrong Report, it did not dispute the legal necessity of setting aside the convictions of the 5 defendants based on the new DNA evidence that Reyes had raped the jogger, but it disputed acceptance of Reyes' claim that he alone had performed the crime. To quote, "The word of a serial rapist is not something to be heavily relied upon." They believed the defendants assaulted her, and then Reyes possibly came along and raped her after the fact.
Yeah, it's like an Easter egg hunt. You know, you're just walking through Central Park and you're like, hey, an unconscious woman.
Whoa. It's like
today's my lucky day.
I hit pay dirt.
Again, I'm not laughing at rape, okay? I don't want anybody to think I'm laughing at rape. And because I have apologized for, you know, and assisting the people in coming to the conclusion that I'm not laughing at rape, people will comment, say, C. Derick Miller is laughing at rape.
He's a rape laugher.
Yes, he's a rape laugher. I'm not laughing at rape at all. It's
just the ridiculousness of the argument that they're like,
right.
Oh, they just happened to walk by and see an unconscious woman. Hey, guys.
This is the second unconscious woman I've found in the last 20 minutes. It must be Central Park.
In the 1980s.
In the 1980s.
Oh, man. All right. Well, the report also believed that the inconsistencies contained in the various statements were not such as to destroy their reliability. On the other hand, there was a general consistency that ran through the defendants' descriptions of the attack on the female jogger. Quote, "She was knocked down on the road, dragged into the woods, hit and molested by several defendants, sexually abused by some others while others held her arms and legs, and left semi-conscious in a state of undress." You know, did they ever think that maybe the stories were consistent because that's what the police were feeding these juveniles to tell them?
Right. And then they turned them all against each other.
Right, exactly. So in 2014, Mayor Bill de Blasio ran on a platform of resolving the matter once and for all. The defendants sued the city of New York and had one hell of a payday. Mayor de Blasio was quoted as saying, quote, "An injustice was done, and we have a moral obligation to respond to that injustice. I think the way we have proceeded was with an understanding that had to be rectified in a way that made sense and a way that was mindful and careful. But I think we're on the right track. And I think the moral issue is quite clear and obviously was made clear by the court's decision in recent years." Unquote. In 2003, Trisha Meili published a book titled I Am the Central Park Jogger. She also became an inspirational speaker who works with victims of sexual assault and brain injuries. It is reported that she still suffers from memory loss. Trump also popped back up in 2014
one does,
with an opinion in an article in the New York Daily News. Notice that the Times didn't carry this.
Yeah, they're like, you know, we're sick of you. Go to the Daily News instead.
He thought the settlement was a disgrace and that he believed the Central Park Five still to be guilty. Quote, "Settling doesn't mean innocence. These young men do not exactly have the pasts of angels." Unquote. I just can't stop laughing in my head right now. He even brought it up again in his 2016 presidential campaign, causing Senator John McCain to pull his endorsement.
Because the guy just can't let it go. Here he is. He has all these
he's never wrong.
He has all these criminal charges coming down the pipe with his name all over him, and he's still talking about Hillary Clinton's email. The guy just can't let stuff go.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk about the lives of the men after the vacated judgment. Antron McCray was the first to move away from New York. He's married, has 6 children, and lives and works in Georgia.
Good for him.
Kevin Richardson is married and lives with his family in New Jersey. According to the Innocence Project, he has acted as an advocate with Santana and Salam to reform New York State's criminal justice practices, advocating methods to prevent false confessions and eyewitness misidentifications. Among their goals were required videotaping of interrogations by law enforcement, such as law passed by a New York State legislature and went into effect on April 1st, 2018. Yusuf Salam has been an advocate for the reform in the criminal justice system and prisons, particularly for juveniles. He has spoken against practices leading to false confessions and eyewitness misidentifications, which can lead to wrongful convictions. You don't say. He also works as a motivational speaker. Living in Georgia, he's a married man with 10 children.
Good God, he's been busy.
He serves as a board member of the Innocence Project. As noted, Salam was an advocate for the law passed in New York in 2018, requiring videotaping of accused subjects in all custodial interrogations for serious crimes. In 2016, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama.
I miss that guy. But, look, this is two. 2 of the 5 have moved to Georgia.
I know. I thought that was interesting, too.
Like, Georgia is one of the,
it's like
no offense, it's one of the most racist places I've ever been.
Right.
And
so maybe it's like, all the old retired people moved to Florida. Maybe the
maybe,
exonerated
I don't know.
moved to
Maybe
Georgia.
they were both like, we're very vocal about this kind of thing, and this is where we're needed. Maybe it's that.
I wonder if the Innocence Project is in New York, but I was like, I wonder if they have a big presence down there or something,
right?
Like one of their satellite offices. I don't know.
Possibly.
All right, so Raymond Santana had been out of the prison for 6 months before he was found guilty of possessing crack cocaine in 1998 and reincarcerated for a term of 3.5 to 7 years. He was released in 2002 when the prosecutor, agreeing that his sentence had been higher due to his subsequently vacated conviction for raping Meili, reduced it to the 18 to 48 months that it would have typically been given a first-time offender. He currently lives in Georgia.
God, there's another one.
Not far from McRae. He serves as a criminal justice advocate for the Innocence Project and spoke in New York to audiences with Richardson and Salam to advocate passage of the New York State Justice Reform Law that passed in 2017. He has also appeared with other involved men in presentations at local schools and colleges. In 2018, he started a clothing company, Park Madison NYC, named for the avenues near his former home in New York. Some of his merchandise commemorates the men of the Central Park 5. All right, and Corey Wise, who changed his first name from Carey, Kharey, and it's now Korey, after being released from prison, still lives in New York City, where he works as a speaker and justice reform activist. He donated $190,000 of his 2014 settlement to the chapter of the Innocence Project at the University of Colorado Law School to aid other wrongfully convicted people to gain exoneration. They renamed the project in his honor and the Corey Wise Innocence Project. That brings up the Ryan Ferguson case. He got $11 million. I wonder how much he donated to the Innocence Project.
If any at all. I don't remember. I mean, you figure that would be something that would be in the information readily available. They would want people to know that. Maybe he didn't. It seems like a lot of, they're not kids anymore, but they were kids when they were originally locked up. It seems like their focus after their release is to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else.
Right.
Whereas other people get out and flip everybody off using that 4-letter F word that we're not allowed to say on this show anymore. And just basically they're like, look at me, I beat the system. It's like all in your face kind of thing. Whereas the Central Park 5 are just a little bit more considerate and helpful when it comes to the defense of other people.
Right. Well, I do want to mention that Netflix did a show about this case called When They See Us. And it's a very interesting watch, and it definitely goes through a lot of talking about how, the police really treated these kids. And I would suggest everybody watch it if they're interested in this case. It's called When They See Us. It's on Netflix. It's not free and in your pockets, but it is in your pocket. It's just not free.
Right. Yeah, I dumped my Netflix. I don't have I'm one of the few people in this country who doesn't have Netflix anymore. I don't care what happens to the kids from Stranger Things because they're all going to be in their 30s by the time the next season comes out. I never watched it.
Yeah.
Like I had it for months. Like my kids watched it.
Yeah.
And then I dumped it. They all called once, asked why, and then I hadn't heard from them since.
So that's what you got to do to keep the kids around, keep your Netflix account.
That's why they all have my Voodoo password as well. And I change the password like once every few months just so I'll hear from them.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the Central Park 5. What's our final thoughts on this case?
Oh, this is a really interesting case. I can't believe that I went through my entire life especially with my love for New York City, without hearing anything about this. And, of course, I didn't hear Donald Trump talking about it during his presidential campaign because I turned my cable off long before that.
Right.
I just really didn't pay much attention to anything that was coming out of his mouth. So, yeah, I knew absolutely nothing about this case. I had heard of the Central Park 5 before. I didn't know what they were guilty of, what they did, who they were. But now I do.
And I think it's just one of those cases that really accentuates the police, being able to kind of mold their case. You know what I mean? Like
right.
they go in and they tell one kid, oh, well, the other, this other guy confessed and said that you were there. And if you don't tell us that you were there, then you're going to get convicted and he's going to get a light sentence. And, and you got 14, 15-year-old kids. They're sitting there thinking, I don't want to go away for the rest of my life. Like if I just say that I did it, then they'll, give me light sentence, 5 years, 3 years, whatever, and they'll be out of there.
Well, it seems to be par for the course on this podcast. You have a suspect, you pick a suspect, and then you mold the case around that suspect rather than doing actual police work and picking the correct suspect. It's so much easier to write a suspect. It's so much easier to invent a conviction
right
for a particular suspect than it is to actually take the time, do the research, do the actual police work, and find the right person.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the American Justice Podcast. As always, if you have any comments or concerns, please give us a call at 972-944-0444. And until then, remember to stay aware,
stay strong,
and get involved. We'll see you next time.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC of Dallas, Texas. Your hosts are Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First and most preferred is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you'd like to blog about the show, you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and let us know what you think there. If you're a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter at @AJusticePodcast. We would very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review on all the podcast streaming platforms.